I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, a company you may never have heard of, but get ready to hear a whole lot more. Glencore, the world's biggest commodities trader, almost 4 decades in private hands, now public to a chorus of controversy. Also, my word is my bond, but what is a bond? This man explains all about one of the most crucial financial instruments in the world today. Plus a look at tomorrow's car and where 4G wireless technology could literally be driving us next. But we begin this week in Switzerland, about 30 kilometres outside Zurich actually, and a company called Glencore. In the public domain, it's not been a big name because it's not been public. It's been in private hands for almost 40 years. But now it represents 2011's biggest share market listing, or IPO. And in floating on the London and Hong Kong stock exchanges, Glencore has almost instantly opened itself up to all sorts of criticism. Why? Well, it's big, really big. And that means it dominates the market in a way few other companies do. Valued at $58 billion, Glencore is the world's biggest listed trader of commodities by capitalisation. It raised $7.9 billion in its London stock sale and has revenues of $144.9 billion. Put another way, the same as the economic output of the whole of New Zealand. But Glencore doesn't have a population of 4.2 million people like New Zealand does. It makes do with just 55,000 employees. It operates on nearly every continent and holds stakes in publicly traded companies worth $30 billion. And its CEO, Ivan Glassenberg, owns almost 16% of the company, valuing his holding at $9.3 billion. Now, obviously, it's not illegal to be a big, successful company. But when one company has this much influence through its size, and some say even its practices, then there is a concern. Consider these stakes. The oil market. Glencore's got a 3% market share. Not huge, I'll grant you. But then you get into the other numbers. Copper, up to 50% of that market. Zinc, even more, 60%. And grains, 9%. But think about the effect that would have on food prices, the absolute basics for so many people around the world. In fact, Devlin Kuyik, who's a researcher with GRAIN, a non-profit organisation on food security, told Al Jazeera Glencore owns almost 300,000 hectares of farmland and it is one of the largest farm operators in the world. They're engaging in speculation on the grain trade and have immense market power. And their executives are going to become very rich off this public listing, leading many to question why a select few should have so much control and so much wealth. Let's discuss Glencore with Andreas Mithbach, who is from the Bern Declaration, a group which monitors the role of Swiss corporations. He's in Zurich for us. Before we get going, I just want to point out we did invite Glencore's CEO to appear on this program, but have had no response from the company. Is that in itself, and I'm asking this to you, Andreas, an indication of the pressure and the scrutiny that Glencore is currently under?
Well, I wouldn't say that's an indication of the pressure. It's clearly an indication of the corporate culture of Glencore. They have been secretive for 40 years. They have denied questions by press, by civil society, by almost everyone. So they're still in their traditional mood.
What did you make of the public listing and the effect it has on the company for such a secretive company to have to open itself up like this?
Certainly there is a certain opening up if you think of annual meetings that they have to hold. But from a financial point of view, they haven't been so secretive because they've tapped the bond market since 2002 and they had out financial data and annual reports. They were only directed to investors, but they have been out. So therefore, there wouldn't be that big jump. And when it comes to listed companies, a listed company only has to produce consolidated accounts, which means that you lose all the interests, the really interesting information, what happens between the subsidiaries of a company, and that's precisely where, for example, the aggressive tax planning takes place.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of these issues which has come up. One I'm reading here in Brussels, I think it was, Belgium it was, yes, alleged tax evasion, corruption, environmental damage by one of its subsidiaries. How serious are those allegations against Glencore?
They're quite serious. For example, one of the cases we're working on relates to tax evasion in Zambia. Well, the simple fact is Glencore runs a mine in Zambia since 2001, a copper mine, and this mine has never paid any taxes in Zambia. And we're talking about a copper boom years with copper prices going to the roof, and somehow this company didn't make any profit. So why did it make those profits? Because it was inflated with costs, all sorts of costs. It did charge not the real copper prices of the London Stock Exchange when it sold to other Glencore subsidiaries. Those are all kinds of aggressive tax planning measures Glencore applies to the detriment of Zambia and the Zambian people. When it comes to the environment...
Sorry, carry on.
When it comes to the environment, well, Glencore is active in very, very difficult countries, like, for example, DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Some large big mining companies wouldn't dare at this point to be active there. Glencore does. It is an environment where you don't have basically no environmental legislation that really works, and you have a lot of social conflicts. But at the same time, Glencore is a company that has never written a sustainability report or doesn't participate in initiatives around mining and human rights. So it's probably the least fit company to be in such challenging environments.
It's been accused of insider trading, which is obviously very serious, but what strikes me and almost interests me more is the sort of, I'm calling it legal insider trading, just the fact that it is such a big company, it's got access to so much information, it has so much influence over governments, that it almost becomes an insider trader. It's got the inside track, it ends up setting the world prices, commodity prices, and leading the way in that sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the interesting thing you find in the IPO prospectus is that they've counted how big their share in that part of the commodity markets that is freely available for sale is. And it's incredible. It's in some commodities, it's above 50%. So they're really in a almost controlling position, for example, by commodities like zinc or others. And if... given the fact that they also own large warehouses, they just acquired an additional warehouses last year, they're really in a position to storage a part of their own production or what they bought in order to shrink the available supply and push up prices up. So this is really something that scares me also.
But their argument, I'm sure the company's argument would be, well, we're successful, we're a big company, we've grown, we've become successful. Why should people, or why should we be penalised for that in people's eyes?
Well, the point is they have been successful, especially the managers of Glencore. They have been extremely successful in terms of their personal wealth they made with the IPO. But it has been made on the detriment of poor people in producing countries. We think that there is a total... it's total out of balance that so few people sitting in the tax haven of Zug can earn so much, while the population of impoverished countries where the wealth really came from, where it's dug out of the earth, still stays poor. That cannot go on like this.
So is there any way, just finally, to rein in a company like Glencore?
Well, I think it needs a lot of pressure from all sides. It needs, first of all, civil society pressure, which is a little bit easier upon a listed company. Then it needs also pressure from the political side, and both at national level and also at international level. I don't think that in 20 years' time, the way the distribution of natural resources wealth is carried out today will be seen as something that was reasonable and fair. And I'm quite optimistic that by combining civil society pressure from producing countries, from the countries where they are headquartered, we can put up the pressure to change the situation.
Andreas Misbach joining us from Zurich, talking Glencore and Counting the Cost. Thank you for your time. And still ahead this week on Counting the Cost, a fairly standard-looking car. We'll find out how it's equipped to switch off the iron, play movies and call out the repairman, all without leaving the driver's seat. Right now, though, the sovereign bond market. It struck us this week that while it has a real stranglehold on Europe at the moment, and as such features regularly on Counting the Cost, we haven't really ever explained it all. Because while you can look at a sovereign bond as the mother of all IOUs, there is a lot more to understand beyond that. So, in response to a request from you, the viewer, we've brought in an expert. Here is Andrew Dell, the head of debt capital markets for Central and Eastern Europe, the Middle East and Africa at HSBC Bank. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. We're here to demystify bonds, basically. So I have to start with the absolute basic question. What is a bond? Why am I issuing a bond in the first place? What am I trying to do?
If you're a state, typically there are two reasons, or broadly, and this is a an oversimplification, just in the.
Well, that's good. We want to get the basics, particularly with the sovereign bonds.
On the sovereign side, there are a number of reasons to issue. Typically, it's either deficit financing. Put simply, the government is spending more than it raises in taxes and income and revenues, or in certain cases, when there's a step change required in an economy, particularly in emerging markets, when people are wanting to build up an economy, people will issue bonds, longer dated instruments, to build infrastructure, to build roads, to build hospitals, to build all of the hard infrastructure that's required for a developing nation.
Let me pick up on a point you made there. You said essentially it's when a government is spending more than it's making in tax revenues and all that. So why then would I want to go in and invest in that country? Why would I want to go in and give that country money if it's clearly got problems making its own money? I know I'm being very basic here, but again, I'm looking at it from the investor point of view now.
You may have underdeveloped infrastructure. You may have very high growth in the economy. You may want to build a highway. You may want to build a hospital. You may want to build schools, universities, or something like that. And clearly, if you build it piecemeal a little bit every year, it's going to take you quite a long time to build your university. If, on the other hand, you borrow the money and you spend it on a highway or a railroad or something, that will enable further economic growth in that country as soon as it's built. If you kind of build a railroad, 5 miles a year, it's actually not terribly useful, or a road, come to that. If you build it in one go, connect two cities together, have all the enabling effects of economic growth, that's why it makes sense as an investor. You're investing in that country, it has high growth potential, you feel confident that the country will be able to pay you back.
So can you relate that then to some of the more high-profile situations? Which you've rightly pointed out the emerging markets, which we'll look at in a moment. For example, early in there were bond issues from Spain and from Portugal, two countries where there's a lot of concern about what they're able to do with their money or the money they do have. So why then would there be, in the Spanish case, it was oversubscribed, it was very popular. Yeah. Again, just explain the basics of why people would be wanting to get into that country when there's so much concern around it.
Well, I think if you're talking about developed countries, and Spain or any of the other Western European countries that one could broadly include within that, are very highly developed economies with many years, many hundreds of years in most cases of strong development. They're also part of the EU, so they're part of probably the biggest single economic bloc on a global basis. So you're looking beyond just the immediate 2011 situation. And if you're investing in a 10-year bond, let's say, you're taking a view as to where one of those countries may be, where the EU may be, where frankly the global economy may be over a period of time. You're not just looking at a situation of saying, here we are in Q1 or Q2 of 2011, how does it look? Where's my snapshot? By definition, you're taking a longer term view as to where you think the prospects of the economies are. And Western Europe has its issues economically. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But at the same time, there's a lot of structural strength in the whole of the Western European and the EU bloc.
Let's move on to emerging markets, which you've mentioned already, in which you do specialise in. I hear names like a dim sum bond and a samurai bond. What are these sorts of things? I mean, they're catchy names attached to things. Essentially, what are they?
Look, global finance is always prone to come up with catchy names for all sorts of stuff. Dim sum bond is a offshore renminbi bond, an offshore Chinese currency bond, which is and the market's grown enormously in the last 12 to 18 months. There's a lot of talk about how global currencies will fit together, and there's huge amounts of liquidity in Asia generally, in China specifically. And this again is another way of recycling of that onshore and offshore. A little more complex in China's case, because there's an onshore market and an offshore market, and but you related but not necessarily open.
You make the good point that there's been a lot of growth and a lot of interest in China recently. How do you or I, as an investor, can we tap into that growth through the bond market, or are they only going after the big institutions?
No, I think as an investor, one can tap into bond markets quite well, but the world has changed a little bit. I mean, as it happens, this was a certificate you happened to bring along. It's it happens to be an Italian lira bond. If one goes back to that, the retail market, the true retail market in Europe, in Italian lira and a number of other of the pre-euro currencies, was really quite vibrant, and people were able to buy relatively small denomination bonds, i.e. individual certificates that were for, if we translate it into euros, amounts of perhaps 10, 20,000 euros, which is a relatively modest amount of money. As the world has developed, with various regulations that have come in Europe and in the US, typically speaking, the minimum denomination for most international instruments now is $100,000 or even larger. So yes, it's available to an individual, but it's an individual who has $100,000 to invest in one particular instrument, which clearly is not everybody. So the kind of man in the street retail market, if we're talking on a global basis is it's not available to everybody. It has to be really above those sorts of things. There are slightly different regulations in different currencies, but as a sort of global, as a generalization, it's those kinds of numbers.
Andrew Dell there from HSBC talking the ins and outs of bonds. Now, the rise and fall of nations often mirrors the rise and fall of companies, and we're going to track just 4 of them for you now in the technology sector. First of all, Russia's biggest search provider, Yandex, floated on the New York Stock Exchange, raising $1.3 billion in what is the world's biggest tech IPO this year. But on the flip side, Microsoft dropped to 3rd in the tech company rankings, leapfrogged by IBM. And get this, if you'd invested $100 in both companies 10 years ago, your Microsoft investment would be worth just $69 now. The IBM one would be $143. And Sony reported an annual loss of $3.2 billion. That is on top of it spilling the details of 100 million customers to computer hackers. At the other end of the spectrum, though, is Google, arguably becoming more dominant and certainly more diverse. Its latest move is a mobile wallet. You essentially use your phone as a credit card. But is it opening itself up to all sorts of security concerns? Kristen Salumi now from New York with more.
We already rely on them for communication, taking snapshots, and entertainment. And soon, Americans' mobile phones will also serve as a form of payment. Internet giant Google calls it the mobile wallet.
Because it is a world first, and it will change the way credit cards are issued in the future.
Using technology known as near-field communications, purchasers tap their cell phone instead of a credit card, allowing them to redeem online coupons and claim rewards all in the same fell swoop. The transaction is then billed to your credit card.
I think it's very convenient. Very convenient. Don't have to go digging around for multiple cards.
I oftentimes, get something in my email about a product that's being offered or a coupon, and I think it would be very convenient.
Right now, Google's mobile wallet can only be used in certain stores in certain cities where it's being tested out. Getting more retailers to invest in the necessary equipment is just one of the challenges to making this technology more widespread.
I think there's a lot of questions here.
Techies say convincing consumers it's safe is another.
Anytime that you're putting your credit card information on another device, you're a little bit hesitant, especially what happened with Sony and the PlayStation 3. Those credit card numbers were compromised just a month ago. And, yet the NFC chip that's on the Google phone is supposed to be a lot more secure than that.
But many predict it's only a matter of time before other technology companies and networks offer the same service. And consumers seem eager to answer the call.
And here's another look at future technology, this time from French company Alcatel-Lucent. It was almost written off a few years ago after 10 years of losses, but is now under new leadership and has become big in 4G telecoms technology. Right now, a lot of us have got 3G capable phones, which allows us internet and app usage on the go. 4G is faster, and as you'll see in this next segment, opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Right, so this is the car we've come to see. It's a hybrid Toyota car, but for once it's not the hybrid nature of the car, the engine, the cleanliness that they're looking at. We're looking at what's inside the car. Alcatel-Lucent are telling us that basically what is inside this car electronically could possibly change the way we drive, change our whole driving experiences. So we will talk to Nicolas Bouvreau, who's in the passenger seat here in the car, who's Vice President of Alcatel-Lucent in the Middle East. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Cameron.
We're just looking at a whole lot of screens, and it looks like a gadget dream, basically. Talk me through the very basics of it.
Okay, so what you have in this car, basically this is a normal car, a normal platform, in which we've added a communication interface for each passenger, which gives you access to what you normally have access to when you're in front of your PC or any other area. So this is what we call the connected car. Mm-hmm. And the main difference, why are we able to do that now, is because we're able to do it through the fourth generation networks, the 4G, or also called LTE, which is starting to be appearing in this region and all around the world.
Okay,
so this gives you access to faster speeds and higher latency, so you can have access to all these applications that we'll talk about in a minute in a much better user experience.
Right, so I mean, the argument that some people have said to me, well, if I've got an iPad or an iPhone or something with me in the car already, as a passenger, or even if a driver who's stopped, I would have all these things available to me. You're saying it's better than that, basically.
Exactly, it goes way beyond that, because this is also connected to the car. And so you have access to different things, so you can use it as a phone here, you have the games, navigation, entertainment, and the one I want to show you here is the internet. So of course you have access, as you would have on any other device, to the internet, and you can browse through any website that you want.
That's not a bad one.
Just so happened that this is the one that comes up by chance.
We didn't set that up at all.
And so you have this is touch screen technology, latest things, and you have access to everything you want.
Entertainment almost worries me a little bit. The fact that I could watch a video or watch YouTube things in a car. There's got to be a safety concern here as well, surely.
No, definitely. So this is of course intended mainly to the passengers. The driver has to remain in control of the car.
So I can't view this if we're stationary at the moment.
Exactly. When you're stationary, you can do that, but when you're moving, the driver's one is not enabled.
Right. Good. What about what's going on at home? Because you're bringing the home to the car essentially here.
So we go to home control. And as I was talking about, so you can check the status of your doors. You can have, if you have a video surveillance system, then you can see what's going on.
Appliance control. I like the look at that.
Appliance control. There you go. So
when I've left the iron on, I can turn it off.
Exactly. You can what's going on with your coffee machine, with your washing machine.
The one thing which strikes me with all of this, Nicola, is the price, because you are bringing a whole lot more into a car here, and it looks like it would be prohibitively expensive.
Well, I think those things, when they will get to the mass manufacturing and mass production stage, the prices will be going down very cheaply. At the moment, this is a system that is a prototype system.
Of course.
There's a lot of customization associated to it, but down the road it will become a standard option for any car manufacturers, and the prices will go down dramatically.
Have you got companies interested? Obviously this is in a Toyota car.
Yes.
What about taking it beyond that?
Exactly. So this is, I think, where maybe I should have started from, is this initiative is not an Alcatel-Lucent initiative. This is what we did when we started thinking into that. So we said we need to bring the best of each area of the industry to come up with this system. So we have telecommunication company like us. We have the automotive companies like Toyota and others. We have another car that we've started to display, which is an Audi. And we'll have others.
What's it going to mean for Alcatel-Lucent? Because the company, after the dot-com bubble, it went through a lot of problems, and a lot of people were looking at it, and it went through sort of a messy merger. Now, is this where it's headed? Is this where it's sort of focusing its energies into the 4G side of things?
Absolutely. 4G for us is something which is extremely important. We believe the telecoms industry is moving into that direction. It will go massively towards 4G, and it will go very fast towards 4G. So we are actually, our main interest here is we're building the network that supports this thing. Though this car is connected through an antenna that's on the wood, it's connected to the base stations and the network, and this is really our core business.
Yep, and a very nice car it was too. Now don't forget Counting the Cost online. You start at the main page at aljazeera.net/English. You hit the business tab at the top. You head to the Counting the Cost page from there. And we put all our episodes up there in full if you want to catch up with them at a later date. And then when you want to get in touch, hop on Twitter, search for @KamalAJE, which is me, where I post regular updates on the show. Do get in touch because I really do love to hear from you, our viewers. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santa Maria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.